Welcome to the Attention Deficit Disorder Expert Podcast Series by Attitude Magazine.
Hey everyone, welcome. I'm Susan Kaufman. I'm here to welcome you to Attitude Magazine's ADHD Experts broadcast today. We are super pleased to welcome Rebecca Branstetter and Elizabeth Sautter to share some practical strategies to boost your child's executive functions as we head back into school. Some ways to get your child in school mode so they can listen, so they can pay attention, so they can follow through during their school year that's coming up, whether it's remote or even in class in some cases. Before we start, just let me give you a quick couple of housekeeping items. You may download the slides now if you'd like to see them and even take notes on them or print them by clicking on the event resource section of the webinar screen. And if you are interested in purchasing the certificate of attendance option, you will receive an email about 45 minutes after the live broadcast that explains how to do that. If you are listening to this in replay mode or podcast mode, please visit the webinar replay page on our website, attitudemag.com/webinar, how to improve executive function, for access to both the slides and the certificate of attendance option. So even though you're listening, 2 weeks from now or a year from now, those are still available to you on the Attitude website. After the presentation, Rebecca Branstetter and Elizabeth Sautter will be happy to take your questions, so please start to post them in the Q&A box as they occur to you. I'm going to turn the mic over to them now to introduce themselves and begin their presentation, and I want to thank both of them so much for spending the time to join us today on ADHD Experts. We're really happy to have both of you.
Hi, we're really happy to be here as well. This is a really important moment right now as parents who are trying to rev up our children's executive functioning for back to school in whatever form that takes, right? There's so much unknown out there, but there are some things we do know about revving up children's executive functioning, and we're super excited to share them with you. So I'm Dr. Rebecca Branstetter, and I'm a school psychologist for over 20 years. And so I've worked with a lot of different children, and many of which who have ADHD. I've also authored several books on ADHD and executive functioning, including the Everything Parents Guide to Executive Functioning, which is chock full of strategies, and I'm going to share a lot of them with you today. And I want to kick it off to my wonderful colleague and friend, Elizabeth Sautter, to introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Elizabeth Sautter, and I'm a speech and language pathologist, but I call myself more of a social cognitive specialist because I am super passionate about social emotional learning and executive functioning in the field of speech pathology as well. So I am the co-founder of an organization called Communication Works. We're a group of speech therapists in the San Francisco Bay Area focusing on schoolwork. I am the founder of Make Social Learning Stick, which is a blog and a book and consultation and training. And I'm also a Zones of Regulation collaborative trainer. Many of you might know of that. It's a curriculum developed by Leah Kuyper, an occupational therapist that focuses on self-regulation. On a personal note, I am a mom of two teenage boys, one 13 and one 16. My 16-year-old is diagnosed with ADHD, learning disabilities, and anxiety. And my younger son has anxiety, and now we're questioning some inattentive ADHD-like symptoms as well. So lots going on. And Rebecca and I have partnered together now for many years. And over the last couple of years, we've been creating and are super excited to have put out a online parenting course and community called Make It Stick Parenting, which really focuses on supporting parents and caregivers in how to help your child navigate social situations, boost emotional intelligence and manage emotions, and also achieve goals both with academics and life goals. So that is a course and a community that we are partnering on together, which has been a lot of fun. So now we're thinking about the topic of today, revving up for back to school. This is an unprecedented time that we all are in together, but it feels so isolating in our homes here, right? On top of each other with kids with ADHD, managing emotions and focus and attention. And we all know how hard it is to go from undesired or to desired tasks to undesired tasks. So that's what we're thinking about now as we are transitioning back to school. And many of you have probably done a lot of executive function strategies over the years. So maybe we just need to remember some of those, but maybe also some of them haven't been able to stick with your child. So we're going to be sharing with you today 3 strategies. It's a bottom-up approach to how to help these strategies stick with your child. When we are thinking about this, does any of this look familiar to you? Like maybe there are screen time is a lot more leisurely for your children, and there are late nights happening. Maybe your kids are sleeping in. I know mine don't sleep in at all, but Rebecca's do. It can be hard to change that routine. Maybe there might be some time blindness going on. Like, what day is it today anyway? Saturday, Tuesday, who even knows? And so thinking about that, revving up the brain to being able to get back to what we are going to be going into in terms of more focused and structured time with school. And we all know a little bit what's on deck. Hopefully you do. It's been very uncertain with some schools, but now they're making the plans for what that's going to look like. And maybe it's different if you have 2 different children in different grades like I do in middle school and high school, and it's looking different for both of those schools. But it's something similar to what we had in the spring, except for maybe a little bit more structured. But we all know how stressful that was, and especially for our kids with executive function challenges. And if you're anything like me, where you're working from home, you might find that to be a tough situation, whether you're working from home or not. Many of us didn't sign up to be homeschooling parents. And we know that our kids with executive function challenges have these lagging skills when it comes to initiation. Potentially they procrastinate. I can do that later. Mom, I got that. It's constantly what I'm hearing at home. And not being able to see the gestalt, the big picture, the end result, and being able to get and chunking out and getting the steps done to be able to get to where they need to go. So this can be extremely challenging for parents, and I can speak to that myself. I'm managing my own anxiety as I'm thinking about revving up school for my children, and it's number 1 strategy for me is self-care every day and compassion every day so that I can be able to support them. And so thinking about this, we're going to be sharing 3 strategies that will help.
So I'm going to talk about the agenda for today. And Elizabeth and I are very much into practical strategies, things you can do day 1 of distance learning or returning your child to school. So we want to rev things up. So a lot of us are experiencing, we had these distance learning moments, and maybe it did not go well for you, and you want to reboot. And round 2, you'd like for that to be a little bit more smooth, or maybe your child is returning to school and you want to make sure that they're revved up. So one of the first things that we know our kids are going to need to do is to be turned on to listen and focus, right? Not only to you as your parent, but if you're also a parent/teacher now, to listen to that, and also to their own child's teachers or anyone that they're working with. So that's step 1. We're also going to teach you about a little bit what we call zoning the home, which is for a smooth transition back to school mode. As Elizabeth talked about, our kids are in this sort of, at least mine are, this sloth-like, there's no time kind of thing. And we're going to rev them up to something, a lot more structured. And so we want to think about how do we set up our home environment for success in that transition. And then we also want to think about follow through. When you're asking your child to finish that task, do that homework, finish your chores, or do the distance learning that's been assigned, you are going to be thinking about follow through. And then at the end, we want to invite you can download all the tools that we're going to share in this webinar, so that you'll have those handy and you can start to use them right away. So we're going to dive into part 1, which is how to get your child's brain turned on for listening and paying attention. So I'm going to show you a visual aid. We love visuals. Have you ever had this experience where you're trying to talk to your child and it feels like they're not listening to you? If you have not had this experience, then you are not a parent. right? You do not have a child, because we know this happens a lot. It happens with children all the time, but with children with executive functioning or attention challenges have even more challenges with this, right? They have trouble listening to directions or focusing or following through, particularly, as Elizabeth said, to like load desired tasks. So it often seems like my kid is just choosing to ignore me. Or they're choosing to ignore the directions that other adults are giving them. But I want to invite you to pedal back for a second, and we're going to think about the skills, the foundational skills that are needed for your child to listen and focus. So it's a little bit of a mindset shift that I'm going to share with you, which is moving from my kid is choosing to ignore my directions. They're ignoring me, or they're actively resisting what I'm asking them to do. And I want you to think about it more as maybe there's a foundational skill at play. Maybe your child can't listen or focus because their brain is actually not turned on. So, that means that they really need to, in order to listen and focus, and many of you already know this, they need to be self-regulated first. So self-regulation is, the loose definition is like that just right, the Goldilocks level of sensory input, not too much, not too little, the Goldilocks level of emotions, revved up, but not too revved up, right? Or making sure they're not too low energy, the right behavior for the situation. So that self-regulation is so important to be in play before we ask our children to perform something on demand or listen and focus. Because if any of those are out of balance, the brain is not turned on for learning of any kind. And it's especially true for emotions. And I think probably as a parent, you can, this is a high anxiety time. Just so think of a time when you were agitated or stressed or, distracted by your own feelings. Were you ready to sit down and listen to people talking to you and attentively follow through on some cognitively complex task, focus for long periods of time and give it your best work? No, because you were dysregulated. When you have dysregulation as an adult or a child, your brain is not turned on for learning. So I'm going to give you a 2.5-minute neuroscience lesson. Many of us who work with students with ADHD or have kids, we already know about frontal lobe functioning, right? We know that this is the region of the brain that's involved with rational thinking, reasoning, planning, following through, self-control, self-regulation, all of those skills. And we know that that's a developmental skill that is often lagging in students with ADHD. And we also want to think, though, about the reactive brain. So this is the brain stem, which is fight, flight, freeze, and lesser known faint, right? It's essentially survival mode. So when we're all under stress, our resources, our cognitive resources are being diverted to brainstem. And when they're diverted to brainstem, our frontal lobes are not available for thinking and reasoning. I will give you like a 2-second example. So I had an office in which there was a code in which you had to type in the code or the alarm would go off. One day I typed it in incorrectly and the alarm went off, whoop, whoop, right? And I went down this like, oh my gosh, police are going to come. They're like, what's going on, right? And for the life of me, my brain went blank. I could not think of what that code was. And then I started to get more and more stressed and I had no frontal lobe functioning, planning and organizing. And so, fortunately I had the code written down and I went to that and I put it in. But my point is that when you are under stress, when your child's under stress, in the, evolutionary sense, it was when like a bear was coming at you or something. But now that bear could be the worries about distance learning, worries about getting sick, the stress of being home all the time. So we want to be really aware of that. When we tend to the emotional regulation of our children, then their brains are going to be more online for learning. So I'm going to drop executive functioning truth number 1. It may not be about your kid doesn't want to listen to you or they're ignoring you. They might be in brainstem. They might be stressed out. We're stressed out. That trickles down. Kids and adults can't use a single executive functioning skill, focusing, starting with, sticking with tasks, ignoring distractions, if they're not self-regulated. So my point is we really need to note that foundational skill of self-regulation. So you might be saying, great, Rebecca, that sounds awesome. How? Right? These skills can be revved up proactively and in the moment. So I'm going to give you executive functioning tip number 1, which is both of those things. One of the most powerful tools in the research that's been shown to build focus and listening skills is teaching your child mindfulness. And the reason why it's both proactive, it builds that rational brain functioning, and it's also in the moment. It can help down-regulate kids when they're overactive in their brainstem. So you probably have heard mindfulness before. Maybe you have your own image of what that portrays. And maybe you're thinking of sitting like a lotus flower for hours and hours. And there ain't no way my kid's doing that. That doesn't have to be what mindfulness is. When you peel back mindfulness, and this is how I explain it to kids, is paying attention to one thing at a time and not judging it. So we're just kind of paying attention to what's happening. So whether I'm eating and I'm just eating, I'm walking and I'm just walking, I'm doing math and just doing math, this is mindfulness. Breathing, just focusing on breathing. So many of you out there, maybe you're like, oh, I tried mindfulness and it didn't really work with my kid. They're not into it. They think it's boring, right? Every kid has an experience with mindfulness, has their own personal Yelp review, I call it, their own level of buy-in. So I've worked with so many students in the schools on mindfulness, and they range from oh, it's so boring, right? All the way to oh, I feel like me again. Can we do mindfulness, right? A lot of kids are in the middle. I like some mindful stuff, like that mindful eating one is pretty awesome, right? And so if you're new to mindfulness or you've experienced it and your kid's kind of resisting it, we want to offer up some research and if your kid's older, you might kind of share this research with them, that it's been shown to boost attention and learning skills, more emotional and social skills, and also counteracting stress, resilience skills are built. It helps with trauma, and it helps with stress. So all of these things are key benefits of mindfulness. And here are some practical strategies. And the first thing we're going to put in our kit to help you rev up your child's executive functioning for skills is actually that foundational skill of self-regulation using mindfulness. Now, you can also use mindfulness to be proactive and build it in as a part of your family culture. But you can also use it in the moment to down-regulate and get back to out of brainstem into rational brain again. Oh, and fun fact, parents, mindfulness is something parents can do too for coping with stress and anxiety and worries and grounding yourself. So mindfulness is not always a spectator sport. It's not something we're going to teach our children and have them do it. We can do it all together. And this resource here is a lot of great activities, books, and resources for mindfulness. So if you aren't familiar with it, you can dabble in it. If you've dabbled and your kids don't like it, you can dive a little deeper.
Mindfulness has actually changed my life as a parent, and I use it a lot with my clients that I work with. And I think that not only I love what you said about being a spectator, not being a spectator, because if your children are watching you do this, it also just is contagious in the environment, and then it models for them how you're regulating yourself too, which we all know that we're under a lot of stress as parents at home right now. We've gone over the first strategy for you, which is the mindfulness piece and tuning on your brain for listening and focus. And now we're going to be tuning into the second one, which is about zoning the home. And before we go to this mindset shift, though, I want to talk just a little bit about zoning the home. So many of you probably have thought about getting your children out of the places where they're having more leisure time and just sort of kicking back on their beds with their phones or whatever they're doing, and having a spot that is good for the school spot. So that might be, if you're living in an apartment or a smaller area, it might be like part of a kitchen table that you can zone off. And maybe you can have your child collaborate with you and create some sort of planner with a calendar of when things are going to start. You can have a countdown for school. Actually, on my website, I have some resources I forgot to mention. I have some books, a lot of children's books, and there's a lot of books there on mindfulness. But I also have the calendar for the month, which is a free resource, is talking about transitions, and one of them is starting a countdown. Many of you might have already started school, and many of you are starting this week or the following weeks to come. But just thinking about having that as a designated spot so they kind of know that they're transitioning their body away from an area where it's more of the hangout computer or the chill out zone to a more cognitive place. We actually cleaned out our garage. It's been a huge endeavor for this summer to have that be more of the classroom area. We have fidgets on the tables and highlighters and calculators and things like that. So the kids are going to go and take turns in there to have more focused time for their Zoom because they're going to be online. But you might have a child that still resists. I mean, you could make this as pretty as possible and very designated to a classroom or a focused area. But you still could have children resisting. So we want to just invite the thought of changing the mindset. Like, even though I've set everything up for my child, they're still resisting. So thinking about, judging and being frustrated with them, maybe it's a little bit more of getting that prefrontal cortex engaged and thinking about some of those underlining invisible basic needs or biological needs that might be impeding them from being able to turn on their brain. And so what we're talking about here is the mindset, the executive function truth number 2 is that thinking about these unmet, invisible needs, basic needs, maybe the underlying cause of their learning challenges. And, we think about this a lot when we have younger children, where we carry a lot of snacks in our backpacks or purses or whatever, and how much water they're having. But this pertains to all children, and it seems so basic, but I'm telling you, so I have a 13-year-old I mentioned, he has a harder time identifying when he's hungry, and some of his basic needs that are unmet. And so, he'll come and he'll be like, "Mom, I'm having trouble with this, that, or the other." And I'll look at the clock and it's 1:00 and thinking to myself, has he had lunch today? Because, they're should be making lunch for themselves at this age. So I'm like, "Have you eaten anything?" He's like, "No, I'm hungry." So that hangry state. And then it's just like, give him a cheese stick, and he's a whole different kid. So thinking about this, we might not have signed up to be homeschooling parents or PE teachers, but now we're the lunch monitors as well. So thinking about this, we can think about all the primary needs that might be invisible that we're not necessarily thinking about, and making that a regiment and making it more structured. So things like lack of sleep and dehydration, poor nutrition, those can all really create brain fog and really flare up those ADHD characteristics that can be challenging for the cognitive function that our children need to be using now. And so, all of you have different age children, so just hop onto the National Sleep Organization to figure out how much sleep your children need. And I'm thinking about revving that up, maybe tapering it back so they go to sleep a little bit earlier. We all know about screen time and cutting out screen time in rooms and, hour ahead of time to be able to get that melatonin to kick in and the circadian rhythm, and trying to create some patterns, even on the weekends, so that it's a little bit more regimented so their body knows when it's time to go to sleep. And there's other things that you can do too. There's so much in terms of the temperature in the room and the lighting in the room, and maybe they need some background sound. So just be thinking about that as you're getting your child ready for their transition back to school. Hydration, maybe having a water bottle out for them at all times. I have a water pitcher out because my kids don't really think about it unless it's right in front of their face. And also the water bottle can provide that oral motor input that can be good for stimulation that can rev up the brain as well. And then just, thinking about preparing healthy snacks, and maybe it's Sunday cooking together. So much executive function can be done in the kitchen, planning and sequencing. And a lot of my book, and Make Social Learning Stick, we talk about all the different ways in natural environments that you can practice executive function and social emotional through everyday activities. And one of them, there's a sheet about going to the grocery store and how you can use chores for that as well. But thinking about having periodic snacks and a balanced diet with protein and fats. And then I just actually bought new supplement containers for my kids so they can have them out for each day of the week so we can keep track, and we plan that out on Sundays as well. And so planner for that. Exercise is huge for getting hormones, endorphins going, for mood and regulation. And so maybe our kids have been a little bit more sedentary this summer without sports, but we can think about, getting them on the trampoline, or maybe just doing some wall push-ups, or getting them to run around the block or up and down the block, and thinking about those feel-good breaks that they need to be having throughout the day, and getting their heart rate up so that they can get those chemicals going, is good for cognitive function as well. The next one I want to talk about too, and Rebecca's going to be talking more about this with specific scripts and things to say, but bonding. We know that the kids do really well, and this is so true for my kids, when they bond with their teachers. Well, guess what? We know that it's good when they bond with parents too, but now we're their teachers as well. So thinking about these things and making sure that we're having special time with them outside of the instruction time and all the things that we're doing to set them up for success. But maybe it's just going for a walk and not talking about any school, or maybe it's, following their lead if you have younger children with play. And with my older son now who's driving, it's going for drives and looking at the sunset together and just having that special time so it's not just business. I also personally, I'll throw myself under the bus, have to watch my tone of voice. I can get very controlling and kind of demanding, and I have to remember some of my scripts that I know of so well, and thinking about collaborative ways to talk to them in terms of creating that connection so that they're not like getting out of my face, or they hear me as like the Peanuts characters of wah, 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 wah. So that can be very important to be thinking about that. And then also to sensory. So we are sharing space, and that has been a challenging situation for many of us. I will say that it's been for us. I have my son playing lots of loud rap music and tick, tick, tick on his Minecraft computer keyboards, and that has been something that's really gotten to me. I know Rebecca loves the sound of her dogs with the tick 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 on the hardwood floors, which is something that is a hard trigger for her as well. And for instance, my son, he actually is really sensitive to smells, and he spilled pickle juice out of the refrigerator the other morning, and he is just like, every time he comes in the kitchen, I can't smell it anymore. He's like, what is that smell? And it was like, took a shower right afterwards. Huge trigger for him. So thinking about sensory. So many of our kids have sensory processing challenges, which means that they are having a hard time with taking in information from the environment around them. So that is sight, sound, taste, touch, and smell. All the things that have to do with lighting and audio and feeling on your clothes and all of the things. There's also a couple of hidden sensory systems as well that I won't go into now. That's the domain of an occupational therapist, but they're really important to be thinking about when it comes to self-regulation and getting your child to be able to focus. Because for me, like little silly things like having a fan on in the back or background noise can be so dysregulating, and somebody turns the fan off and I immediately go, I can focus now. I didn't even realize. And so some of our kids are hypersensitive to sensory information, meaning that's way too much, avoiding, or hypo, where they want more of it. My son, he does want more background music when he's studying. So these are the things that we want to be aware of. And we also have a handout for you. This is from our course, and we wanted to just share some of these things with you. It's Super Glue Tool, because everything is based on making it stick for our kids who have a harder time with making some of these strategies stick. And this is the SOS strategy for you. It stands for simplify, organize, and making a house sensory friendly. So simplify is decluttering and minimizing and reducing distractions. Maybe that's visual, maybe it's auditory, things like that. And then organize, maybe having bins, the furniture and the seating can be redone, like we have done in our garage, making things systemized so that like maybe you have like Rebecca in her house, she has fold Fridays. So they're doing the laundry together on Fridays. For us, we have meal plans, Taco Tuesday. Monday is Mios, which stands for make it your own self because we have older kids. So I want them to start making their own dinners sometimes. And so you can just systemize things to make it a little bit easier and predictable for you and your children together. And then we have the sensory strategies, which I went over some of those, so I won't spend the time to do that now, but this is for you to use yourself. So we have gone over the getting your brain engaged with the strategy of mindfulness and zone the home with thinking about getting curious and thinking about the importance of the invisible biological needs and the sensory environment as well. We also want to jump kick into a strategy that is so important for thinking about our children in how they are going to be having that future sketch and what's expected and priming our children for what's to come. And so right now, this is where they are, right? They are in that school summer zone where they're staying up late and maybe that time blindness that we mentioned already. And we are going to be going to more of a focus situation, whether that's hybrid and, it's all new too with wearing the masks and all of the things that they need to do to keep the germs away with the hygiene and everything. And so, or it's at home or a little bit of each. For us, it's completely at home. So thinking about transitioning, that is a huge transition, especially when they're in the same environment. So one of the things that we can do that is so important is being able to help them with that future sketch in teaching them what that's going to be looking like, because right now they are in that now bubble of what it feels like to be at home. And we want to be able to transition them into, not being able to just wake up whenever they want. And we want the leisure mode to that learning mode. And we might have a mindset of like, I need to tell my kids what to do to go back to school, and those commands and demands that I fall into quite often. But really what we need to be thinking here is telling is not teaching. We can be helping. This is the executive function truth number 3. You need to collaborate with your child to give them that future sketch and not the commands and demands and telling them. We need to engage their brain with declarative language and questions. And Rebecca will be getting a little bit more into that. But we've also wanted to share with you this mindset of being able to engage their brain by showing them and giving them those visual strategies, because those commands and demands can often be triggers for them. So we have made this visual for you, and we want to talk about what school will look like, because right now what it looks like is, a lot of hanging out, and this is going to look a lot different for kids, and we want to prime them for success. And Sarah Ward and Kristen Jacobson are 2 speech pathologists and experts in executive functioning. I've learned a lot from them over the years, and I want to just share this strategy with you about building that mental image for the future goal, the end result. So we have put in there in your handy survival kit, downloadable, free for you, a couple of these visuals so that you can draw this out with your children. So having them picture what that might be, and maybe you can find pictures over the internet, or maybe they can draw it themselves, or you can write it out. We have one of a boy and one of a girl, so that you can build these future sketch, these mental images. It's such a hard skill for our kids with executive function to be able to plan ahead based on what they already know to do something right then. So we want to prime that for success and give them that end future sketch.
And this has been tried and tested with my 2 children who are 6 and 8, and mixed results with distance learning. And so I wanted to kind of prime them for, we're doing 100% distance. And I was like, well, let's kind of see what they think this is going to look like. So I had them each draw one separately about what is school going to look like? What is it going to look like? And they each drew their own picture. And it's great for younger kids because if they don't have the words to describe things, they have that visual, and visual is great for everyone. And this is a great way to do an expectation check. So my little one drew a picture of herself at the kitchen counter. We got a quarantine puppy, as you do. And so the puppy is on her lap, okay, on a super high bar stool, okay, this squirmy puppy. And she is on a Zoom call, okay, and no one else is around her. And I was like, oh, so who's helping you with this? And she's like, no one. Our puppy, there's no adult around. Okay. And then my other one drew a picture of herself in her room, lounging on her bed with a puppy on her lap. So already I know there's going to be issues around. They both have an expectation that a puppy is going to be sitting on their lap during distance learning, right? And my older one has an expectation that she's going to be able to do schoolwork in a, loungy position. And my other one is going to be, somehow independent, even though she's 6 and, is very new to distance learning. So, and my future sketch was totally different and my husband's was actually different. And so when we put the 4 drawings together, we used it as a way to discuss and collaborate around how can we pre-plan for this. First off, puppies don't sit down during Zoom calls nice and quietly, especially when they have a lot of energy, right? So these are the things you can do that kind of become a window into the problems that might arise due to a mismatch of expectations. So we invite you to do this. Like, what does the morning look like? Right. And maybe you have a picture, like they're actually going to set an alarm clock. Are they going to get dressed? They're going to stay in PJs. If your kid, is thinking, I'm going to stay in PJs all day and your expectation is, no, you're going to get dressed as if it were school, then you can pre-plan for these challenges that might come up. And so it's an asking mechanism, not a telling. You're going to get up and put on your PJs. And that's going to be met. Maybe that'll shoot them right into brainstem. Right. But if we ask them, and instead of telling them, say, okay, so how are we going to navigate this together as a family when we have different ideas? This is one way you can do it. And it's really easy. We did it over our ice cream sundae ritual, just to kind of get our kids primed and ready and to see how the family was going to function for, operation. Oh my gosh, who's getting the puppy? Right. And so I want to talk to you a little bit also about what to say in these moments. So remember brainstem. If we tell them, you get up, you get your jammies you get out of your jammies and you're definitely not going to have the puppy and you're going to not be on your bed, we could inadvertently shoot our kids right into brainstem. But if we plan ahead, we can invite them to think with their rational brain. How is it going to work that both girls have the puppy on the lap? Right? That doesn't shoot them into brainstem. No puppy. It shoots them into thinking and reasoning and planning and forethought. And what's that, y'all? Executive functioning, right? So this is a fantastic tool for that. So you're going to also get some scripts though, because sometimes in the moment we're in brainstem and we don't know what to say, right? So we just say, get on your jammies or get out of your jammies and get dressed or start your work or get on your Zoom call, right? And if we're stressed, we're going to be a little bit more snappy than normal. Like as Elizabeth and I both are prone to, we're no exception. When we're stressed, it trickles down and we might be more prone to doing commands and demands rather than questioning. So you're going to get these in your download. And these are scripts. These are words that work for follow through and questions that move kids into that thinking rational brain and out of brainstem. So, I'm sorry, got excited. You can't read these probably. I personally can't read them because they're so tiny, but I'll give you a couple examples and you get them in the download. So for example, go to bed, you have school tomorrow, right? What's that? Command, demand, brainstem. All right. How about what step are you on in your bedtime routine? And then they're like, what is the steps, right? They start thinking about it. Or how about moving from like, God, can you hear me? I asked you 3 times, it's dinner. Right? So we do that. Sorry, there's a fly. Speaking of distraction, I can see you're really interested in your video game right now. Yeah, it's time for dinner. So can you tell me what's your shutdown plan? And with video games, of course, they're like programmed to like never have an endpoint. Right. So if you just say, what's your shutdown plan? Next level, right? Whatever it is, you can talk with your kid, maybe not in the moment beforehand, pre-planning these things about how to shut down. What is their plan? Is it time, 5 minutes, mom? Okay. Or is it once I, destroy this monster or whatever it is they're playing, right? So again, though, it's asking a question. It's not, can you hear me? I told you shut it down. Shut it down, right? It's what is your shutdown plan? It goes right here. So you're going to get these scripts and moving from commands and demands to questions that we trigger frontal lobe functioning. In our course, we have those pre-planning ones, and we have also after, like if things don't go well and we all have an explosive moment, or what we call parenting pitfall moments, where we fall into that pitfall and they fall in the pitfall and we're both in brainstem, how to repair that in a way that boosts executive functioning. But you're going to get all of these proactive ways to ask for follow through in your downloadable kit. So these are great to move children into the thinking brain STEM. And also it's a great way for you to start practicing, like Elizabeth said, tone of voice, because listen to the two different commands that I'm about to give. What are you doing? What are you doing? Right? The tone matters a lot. Hey, what are you doing? Right? Tone matters a lot. So we want to think about what we're saying and also how we are saying it, so we don't accidentally shoot our kids right back into brainstem. Okay, so we're going to recap what we've learned together because we want to leave time for questions. So here's a recap. Here's your future sketch of positive things that are going to happen when you turn your kid's brain on for learning. We like to give parents a future sketch too. So we're going to help them turn on their brain for listening and focusing. So we talked about the mindfulness as a proactive strategy. It's a tool for getting from brainstem back to rational brain. Also, it builds focus. It builds those neural pathways because they're focusing on one thing at a time, and that builds those neural connections. Elizabeth talked a lot about zoning the home for a smooth transition back to school. So identifying those hidden needs, those sensory needs, those bonding needs, those things that we don't always think of until it's too late and our kid is hangry and yelling, right? So identifying and really putting it to the forefront. I know it sounds like if it was a research article, it'd be like in the journal of duh, right? Oh, duh, my kid needs food. But I know there's so many times in which I forget these things and I'm like, oh my gosh, or I'm hangry. Tend to your own sensory needs as well and primary needs. And Elizabeth also shared the SOS tool for your home, which you can dive into a little bit deeper when you download the packet, which is simplify and organize, and then do make sure that you're checking some of those hidden sensory things that may be triggering your child into brainstem. And lastly, I just talked about increasing follow through. So when you ask your kid to do schoolwork, if you're doing homeschooling or distance learning, or your kind of kid has homework, or you're asking them to follow through on chores or anything really, it's getting your kid back into that mindset, their school mode brain with a future sketch. And I think it's so important what Elizabeth just said about, look, if you're not changing environments, it's really hard for them to change from sloth mode to school mode or whatever mode they're in right now for summer. So some of the tools that we are teaching you are going to be ways to, kind of think about that future sketch. And we talked about how important it is to ask questions. So this is a great opportunity to plan ahead for what their future sketch is, for what distance learning looks like. And then you can also plan ahead for if there's any mismatch of expectations. We also want to invite you to keep in touch. We love geeking out with parents about strategies for emotional regulation, self-regulation, sensory executive functioning, all of it. And so I want to invite you, if you want to get today's survival kit downloaded, you just go to the URL makesociallearningstick.com/survival kit, pop in your email, and then you'll be on our newsletter if you'd like to receive other information and tools. Like every month there's a calendar with like one thing you can do to boost your child's social, emotional, or executive function skills. And then, as Elizabeth mentioned, we do have our online course and community in which parents come together to figure all this out together. So this is something that we invite you also to check out as well. And please keep in touch with us. And we all just wanted to thank you so much for spending your time. I know it's really hard to carve out time to sit in front of a webinar, particularly when you're a parent, right? And we really, really appreciate you coming here. So we wish you all the luck in the world and this back to school transition. And now hopefully you have a couple of things in your parenting toolkit that you can utilize. So Elizabeth, did you want to offer any closing statements before we hop to questions?
No, I'm excited to be in touch with people. We do some interviews on our blogging as well from leading experts. So just jump on over to Make Social Learning Stick and we'll stay connected that way. And thank you for your time today.
Okay, great. Thanks, you guys. Lots of questions here. And the suggestion for mindfulness was really intriguing. It sounds like a great tool. Could you give a little substance about how the listeners can help their children learn mindfulness?
Absolutely. So I can kick that one off. Like I mentioned, this is something that has absolutely changed my life. There's so much research on there, and it's kind of a buzzword, right. About mindfulness. And so I'm going to reiterate the definition that Rebecca mentioned. It's paying attention on purpose without judgment. And so basically what we're trying to do is just get our children and ourselves to be in that present moment. And oftentimes that is, when we're thinking about, especially anxiety or depression, a lot of times anxiety is when we're thinking about future thoughts, and depression is when we're thinking about past things and whatnot. So if we can just get ourselves grounded in the moment, whether that is putting our feet flat on the ground and just feeling our feet in our shoes, wiggling our toes. A lot of mindfulness has to do with breathing strategies, trying to focus on diaphragmatic breathing. So putting your hand on your belly and picturing it like an anchor, and just saying, what really helps me is saying things like, I am breathing in, I am breathing out. And our brain is trained to jump from thought to thought. And we talk about a little bit about monkey mind. And so the whole thing about mindfulness is to catch your brain jumping, and then just saying, whoops, I am ahead of myself right now. I'm not in the moment. I'm worried about something else right now. I need to get right here grounded. And then that's what can bring that presence, peaceful, mindfulness state that is what we need to be doing for executing something in that moment versus all the things that our brain is just full of, especially now with, all the technology and screens that our kids have. So what we're trying to do is just get them back into that moment. And we want to be practicing mindfulness when a child is in a regular state, or a regulated state, So that can be at nighttime. You can have a book on a child's belly and watch it go up and down. You can practice mindful eating at the dinner table. You can practice mindful breathing in the car, blowing bubbles, all different kinds of things, because what we're trying to do is train the brain to be present in the moment so that when we need that time of fight, flight, or freeze, and we can practice that breathing, and it comes really quickly because those neural pathways have been built already. And so practicing it when on a regular basis, there's all kinds of apps. You'll see them in your downloadable PDF that we gave to you, and practice it with your child. It's really good for you to be doing it as well so that your children can see the modeling and then practice it on their own. But like Rebecca said, it doesn't have to be 20 minutes of breathing and whatnot, but it can be little simple things that you're doing even when you're on a walk, just, feeling the feet, watching, the wind go by, focusing on the sounds of the birds. Mindful listening can be really great as well. There's so many different things. As you can tell, I could go on and on about this, but I'll stop here. Hopefully that answered the question.
I think those examples were really helpful. A couple of people mentioned something, which I'm sure this won't be the first time you've heard this quote. How should I approach my 13-year-old who says her friends think mindfulness is stupid because they do it at school, and she wants me to stop even mentioning it ever again?
Yeah, so I have a 13-year-old. I can speak to that, Rebecca. You work with kids too. So my son is having a lot of anxiety right now with the going back to school, and he is 13, and both my kids are too cool for school. So I would go back to the modeling of it yourself and back off from it a little bit. Maybe you can have little things around the house that are helpful in terms of bringing them to the present moment. Maybe that's diffusing aromatherapy or having more like spa-like, we pay a lot of money to go to these spas, right? So if we can create our environment to have that spa music and the spa smells, all of those things are mindfulness. Also, thinking about gratitude and heartfulness, those are part of mindfulness as well. So maybe changing it up a little bit and maybe trying to find a different word that is not I just need to be present right now, or they can see you doing some self-compassion of putting your hand on your heart and your hand on your belly and just taking a deep breath in and telling yourself that everything's going to be okay. So just modeling is what I would do. And then also see if there can be some sort of cool apps that you can use, which are also on that downloadable for you as well. I will say though that, so my kids, I call myself a strategy saleswoman because when I was younger, I did, all the social thinking and all the different things that I pull out of my toolbox for my kids who needed it. And as they got older, they were just like, go away with that. I hate mindfulness and I don't want to hear about the research anymore. And they were slamming the door in my face. I call myself a strategy saleswoman. They were slamming the door. But now I actually hear them saying things to their friends or to themselves. Like, I overheard my older son saying that he was really nervous because he's a pitcher and he got nervous for some reason on the mound. And he said, I just practice my mindful breathing. And so I'm just trying to back off from it a little bit and just ask them what they think is helpful. And so hopefully they can come back to realizing that it can be helpful on their own and not being so driven in their face to make them do it.
That's great. One last mindfulness question before we move on. What is the app that you most recommend for mindfulness for teens and older elementary school kids?
Well, for myself, you have to really test them out. And because there's some, like I like Headspace a lot, but some people have a hard time with the voices on Headspace. And I like the Calm app a lot as well for kids. And I think that they're actually offering it for free for teachers. So check that out.
Wow. Okay, great tip. Yeah. Calm.
Yeah. And
Calm has a good free version as well as a paid version. So
they do. A lot of them have free versions as well because they're trying to get you caught up into the bigger, more expansive ones. So there's some really great ones, especially for adults too, like getting us to go back to sleep and all these different things. Rebecca, did you have a favorite app that you use with? I know that you use actually one fun one. Why don't you share? You told me about this is Shine. That's probably good for teenage girls.
Shine is really great as well. It's a little bit of kind of like a pep talk in your pocket. And it's kind of got really like hip people in it. So I think that it's a good one for teenagers. And I think also I do love Calm. My kids do Calm stories at night. Sometimes I have to lay down with them to get them to calm down. And I don't think I've ever heard the end of Wind in the Willows. Like I'm out before they are. It really, really works. But I do want to hop in a little bit on that mindfulness thing. So for littles, I love, as a school psychologist, you could go down like a Pinterest rabbit hole if you type in mindfulness activities for children. But one I love is the mindful glitter jar. Or a snow globe. And this could be something you can set next to your kid's desk. It could be a fidget. You're going to play with it. But like, I'm feeling stressed. Okay, let's shake it up. And then as it settles, and then when it's all settled, you're settled, right? And then to mandalas, drawing and coloring is very can be very mindful. Infusing art, anything your kid gets lost in, that's like, it can be mindful, right? Oh, well, you're really mindful. You're not eating and on your phone and coloring. You're just coloring. That's mindfulness. So I think also for the question around teenagers being like, oh, that's too cool for mindfulness. I think if she can figure out a way to rebrand it in words that she would use. So for instance, at one high school, school psychologist told me that they had a mindfulness room and no one went, right? Like, let's go to the mindfulness room, right? That's, hippie stuff, whatever. And so they had a contest about to label this room, like the chill out room, the chillax room or whatever. And they landed on the check yourself before you wreck yourself room.
That's great. That's great.
And everyone came in droves. So
that's wonderful.
You might invite your 13-year-old to think about another way to, if she enjoyed mindfulness, to say, oh, it's my chill out plan. I mean, something, whatever language you would use, you could rebrand mindfulness. So it's not that thing my teacher makes me do after recess. It's so boring.
I think that's inspired. Yes. Mindfulness, it sounds like a grown-up word, right?
Yeah.
Like something grown-ups are making you do. Yeah. Just switching a little bit here. There are a number of people who, these are tough ones I'm going to throw at you, I think. I mean, reading these. So these are parents whose kids, I'll just read this one. It was really easy for my daughter to defect and leave her seat meeting during remote instruction. So she'd get frustrated, angry about things, anything from not mastering something right away or being talked over or not being called on. She would lose control and cry, and not having a teacher present or anyone there to hold her accountable for her behavior was really difficult. And similarly, another parent who says, her child with ADHD starts watching YouTube videos during Zoom classes. So This is, of course, the ultimate question, right? How do you keep a child focused on school when they're having these emotional reactions or boredom or whatever as they're sitting watching a Zoom class?
Okay, well, this is a big one. I can start this off.
I know, yeah.
Because I have the YouTube watchers at my own house, and it's hard because I'm working, so I couldn't always be monitoring if he's looking at YouTube or if he's on the Zoom. And he also has anxiety, and he's got some discrepancies between verbal and nonverbal IQ. And so he has a hard time with word finding. So he turns off his screen a lot. And so he's not really engaged. So I actually have a couple of strategies. One for the family who is having that sounds like there's an underlying cause of emotional regulation and self-regulation. And so that is the foundation of it all. And so really, like Rebecca was talking about, figuring out ways to help the child with having those brain breaks throughout the day, being able to make sure that they're getting all of those invisible needs met, the sleep, the nutrition, all of those things. And then the priming of it. So the future sketch, what we did, maybe making a visual of what that would look like, and then trying to do some mapping out of what happens when she has a hard time with, not being called on or being bored or whatever it might be. And I am going to go a little bit to some strategies with the zones of regulation. There's a curriculum that I teach on, mentioned by Leah Kuipers. And so I would highly recommend looking into that. I do webinars, and Leah does too. Actually doing a full day webinar this Thursday on the zones of regulation. So, or email me a little bit more about that and I can direct you. But it's about understanding your levels of alertness and then problem solving to figure out what the social situation is and what is expected for that situation. So, and having tools and strategies in place. So one of the tools and strategies, a cognitive-based tool, if she's able to do this, is called Stop, Opt, and Go. And so stop thinking about all the options that you could do with your daughter when she is having a challenge with the Zoom interactions, thinking about all the options, whether they're good or, pro-social or not pro-social, and then which ones are you going to go with, and trying to figure out those strategies throughout the day. But also really having those emotional regulation brain breaks would be helpful. The other thing I was going to say, I have this coming up with my kids in terms of with the YouTube piece of it, that is just so challenging because they're, what they're used to is playing video games. It's Minecraft or watching YouTube Minecraft at my home. And so that's what he's gravitating towards. So we're really trying to bridge that and talk about what the future sketch is for when that happens. Then you end up with a bunch of zeros that week, and it's just really frustrating. Plus he has anxiety for beating himself up when he's doing it. So we have talked a little bit about what that can look like and how he can train himself to be focused in the moment. I'm also going to be meeting with the teachers and talking to them about ways that you can engage those children in helping them be, part of the learning environment. Maybe they have more breakout sessions on Zoom. There's a lot of things that can be done over the internet to engage our children. And so I'm going to be partnering with some of the teachers in a proactive way to help with that engagement, and also trying to do some projects outside of Zoom so that hold them accountable that they have to then report on when they're partaking, and not just listening mode.
Right. So one way, that one-way communication is really difficult. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I just wanted to add, I invite you to, if we swim up from this question, I think there's a mindset shift or two here as well, which is, and Elizabeth and I talk about this in our course, which is the teachable moment about focusing during distance learning and Zoom is rarely in that moment when your child is dysregulated. There is a great opportunity here to pre-plan for that inevitability, right? Mm-hmm. So let me give you just a quick example. So my little was she was in kindergarten on Zoom, which is like totally developmentally challenging. Like there's no way like a kindergartner should be like Zooming like an adult, right? And we were all kind of like building the plane as we flew it. So I'm not criticizing anyone in this. It's just, it was what it was. But she didn't want to do this word sort activity, and I hate seesaw, and she was blowing up. Right. And so, we did some mindfulness to kind of, took a break and went outside and, played with the puppy. That's her go-to. We had, by the way, pre-planned all the calming strategies for when that happened and had them on the fridge. And I went and pointed. I'm like, which one you want to do? Puppy wins every time. And so after that, we came back and I was like, what were you thinking about during that word sort activity? In my brain, parents love to like, just think like, oh, maybe she has a hard time with the words or whatever. And she's like, I was thinking about missing my friends. So listen, if I had clamped down on, you got to do your word sort, and Mrs. M said, do the word sort and blah, 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 I would have missed an opportunity to teach her about self-awareness. I'm feeling upset, to use a calming strategy, and also to express herself emotionally. So you have to kind of think about, I would invite you, and everyone out here who's wondering about like X or Y behavior, I would invite you to get curious about what's behind that. When our kids have lagging skills, there's an opportunity here to teach them. And so my point is that, I would invite you to do what Elizabeth's talking about, that future sketch. When you get bored and you want to go onto YouTube instead, what can we do and to get re-regulated, because that's not going to be something that's going to be acceptable for your teacher or for me, right? So I invite you to get curious about the why it's happening, and not just assume she's bored. It could be something totally different that's not even on our radar.
So in that regard, there's another question here from a parent who uses screen monitoring to prevent their child from going on YouTube. That sounds like, well, that might work in the short term. It doesn't address your suggestion about understanding what's underlying that distraction. Is that right?
Yeah, yes, I think it's about collaborating and understanding where your kiddo is coming from. That's hard for them. So they're not giving you a hard time about, trying to focus. They're having a hard time focusing. Mm-hmm. That's different. And when they're having a hard time, then it's our job as parents to teach them how to self-regulate, so that they have access to that frontal lobe. She, my daughter was in brainstem. She wasn't going to learn a thing about word sorting in that moment. So it's about collaborating with your child in advance around these things. And if it is about like, we're going to use some screen software that blocks YouTube and things like that, if that's a unilateral top-down strategy, it may be met with more resistance than if that's something that we can have a family agreement about.
Right. That's really a terrific point. Unfortunately, we're out of time. Would you mind repeating the URL for the survival kit so that the listeners can be sure to grab that? It sounds like there are wonderful tips there. And if you could just repeat that URL again, I think that would be great.
Do you have that, Rebecca?
I can probably find it here. It looks like makesociallearningstick.com/survival kit.
Yep, I think so. Yes.
And we can also put that on the website on the replay. So I just want to tell our audience about the upcoming webinars this Thursday. We have a first and a 3-part series, which is about sort of an introduction to diagnosing, treating children in this first one. Then the second part is on teens with Russell Barkley, and then with adults. So it's going to be a great series with some wonderful experts for those of you who want to go back to the basics. And Thursday, the 20th, twice exceptional children. Those are children who are very bright and also have learning disabilities of some kind. So those should be terrific. And I want to thank our speakers again today. Wonderful resources. And I'm sure everyone will be eager to log on and get that great survival kit. So thanks, everybody. And we'll see you later this week.
For more Attitude Podcast and information on living well with attention deficit, visit attitudemag.com. That's ADDITUDEMAG.com. That's ADDITUDEMAG.com. That's ADDITUDEMAG.com.